Welcome everyone to today's program. I am Erin Marshall with Becker's Healthcare. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few key points. Throughout the webinar, you can submit any questions you have by typing them into your control panel in the space labeled Enter a Question for Staff and clicking Send. Our presenters will attempt to answer as many questions as they can during the time we have. You will receive an email within about a week following the webinar that will include instructions for how you can download a copy of the presentation. You will also receive a follow-up email shortly after the completion of the program. You can submit your feedback or any additional questions at that time. This email will not include the presentation. It is now my pleasure to turn the floor over to Brian Warren, Manager of Healthcare Solutions Group at Select International, to begin today's program.
Thank you, Erin. As she mentioned, I manage the Healthcare Solutions Group here at Select International, and I'm excited to lead this discussion because it's an important topic, and we have a panel of experts that are going to bring some unique perspectives. Donna, Mark, and Brad are each going to speak for a few minutes, introducing some important concepts, and then we'll have an interactive discussion. We'll start with Donna telling us about the challenges and barriers she's seen when it comes to creating a culture that values employee engagement. Mark Sevco will take a few minutes to tell us about his success story, making employee engagement really the central theme of the strategies used to make the new UPMC East Hospital a success. And finally, Brad will tell us about the work he's doing at HealthStream, including research on medical staff and employee engagement, communication, and confidence. Then we'll pose questions to the panel, including questions submitted by the attendees. And just to set the stage, I think everybody understands the challenges. Just like other industries who face these challenges or similar challenges, healthcare is realizing that we need to think differently about talent strategies and how those strategies impact organizational goals, specifically things like how to select, engage, and develop leaders, physicians, nurses, and frontline staff who will support those organizational goals. We need to understand what strategies work to build an effective leadership team, medical staff, frontline care providers, all people who can communicate and put patients first. How do you maximize and coordinate employee engagement, talent acquisition, and organizational development? And what does the future hold? And I think the panel will have some insights there. And we'll learn how to get leadership to embrace these philosophies and strategies, because sometimes that's the biggest barrier that we face. The opportunity we have is to learn from the panel's experiences, to hear about the barriers they've faced and what they found works. And our goal, as always in these panel discussions, is to learn from the discussion, to better understand the challenges, and ideally pick up some ideas for things that you can implement in your organization. We were fortunate at Select to work with Donna Katen-Bahensky during her time at the University of Wisconsin Hospitals and Clinics, where she served as president and CEO. We worked with Donna and her team on implementing talent strategies for the system's newest hospital, the American Center, and a project to enhance senior leadership collaboration. Donna previously served as president and CEO at the University of Iowa Hospitals and Clinics and held senior leadership positions at Virginia Commonwealth and Nebraska University Health System, so obviously she brings a wealth of experience. Currently, she uses that experience as an advisor to a number of healthcare companies, including Select, Avia, and Invenia's Partners, among others. She's a faculty member of the Institute of Healthcare Excellence and a former member of the Board of Trustees for the American Hospital Association. And she's been recognized several times by Becker's Hospital Review, including a Top 30 Healthcare Leadership Award. Now I'll hand things over to Donna.
Thank you very much, Brian. Nice to be with all of you, and I'm looking forward to this. So the question here is, what do these changes require? You just saw that whole list of things that we're facing every day in healthcare, and my answer, as you might think, is an extremely talented and engaged workforce. Not revenue, not cost reduction. You need to have the most talented people who are really there at their job, totally engaged every day. So what is employee engagement? I'm not going to go through this direct dictionary. You can look at this yourself. But three things are important here. It's the emotional connection the employee feels. And the more engaged that employee is with your organization, the more effort they're going to put forth. But the current state of employee engagement is not a good one. I have a very good friend who has been working on this for a number of years, and he thinks that this is probably the greatest crisis we have in healthcare today, is the lack of employee engagement. Healthcare is not unique. As you can see here from this Gallup study, 52% of full-time workers in this country are not involved in or enthusiastic about their work, which means the balance of those people who are taking on all that extra work. 40% of those individuals are passively or actively disengaged. In a Forbes study that was recently done, productivity increases by 100% with engaged, happy staff, and the return on investment reflects it. So here's another sad state of affairs currently. All that we're going to have to be dealing with in our challenges. On top of that, the demographics are changing. We're going to need more people to care for our patients. And the hospital CEO turnover is the second highest since 2000, 18% in 2015. Half of nurses are 50 years older, 62% are over 54, and they're considering leaving their workplace. 44% of nurse educators are contemplating retirement, and 43% of active physicians currently are 55 or older. So we obviously have to do something if we're going to take good care of our patients. People are feeling overworked, stressed. Another organization I'm working with is looking at burnout of healthcare professionals, and we will simply not be able to handle the increased clinical volume. So I won't go through this entire list, but as you can see, there's a huge difference between engaged and disengaged employees. You can also see how you can look at return on investment. You can also look at how you can see the impact on the patient experience. Engaged staff use their skill, experience, and their creativity to take intelligent risks and try to figure the solution to all of the problems that we are looking at. And we need every single one of those individuals helping us out. So why do we care about engaged employees? I only have to read the top one to tell you. The top one is about patient experience. Without engaged employees, you do not have a positive patient experience. They're the ones that are out there every single day taking care of that patient, having that direct impact on them. And if they're not engaged in what they're doing, that patient experience is not going to be a good one. Two other things that are on this list: the quality of patient care. We are all under increased pressure to improve quality, all under the pressure to increase the safety of our environment. And we really do need to have our organization be financially viable. But probably most important is that we all want to work and live in an organization in which people are happier, they're thriving, we want to get up in the morning and go to work, and we want to be part of that kind of organization. But like everything, it's not without some challenges. We have barriers. I bet if I were to ask every one of you, and I could see your hands go up now, how many people feel like every single day you're too busy putting out fires to deal with engagement of staff? Probably most of you. Some individuals have an attitude that we pay people for their job. Why should we worry about asking anything more of them? That should be enough. There's an environment that condones bad behavior and negativity, and that just has got to stop, or we are not going to be able to have engaged staff. Not in my job description. I hear that a lot, and I've heard it a lot during the course of my career. But what we want to hear instead is, it's not in my job description, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to help that patient as much as I can. Without the senior leadership, and more importantly, the CEO, it will not happen. That C-suite team needs to be bought in, they need to be highly engaged themselves, and they need to understand their responsibility for engaging the people who work for them. And it needs to be sustainable. There is way too much turnover in healthcare, way too much change to not establish something that will live over time. As I used to say to staff members, I want an organization that I know will be here and strong 100 years from now. Not just 2 years, not just 1 year, So that sustainability is absolutely critical. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. That's a perfect way to kick things off, and we'll pull you back in for the panel discussion. Let's get on to Mark now. We first worked with Mark Sevco as he built the leadership team for the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center's newest hospital, which is UPMC East. As most of you may know, UPMC is one of the nation's largest fully integrated health systems with 21 hospitals and 60,000 employees. We collaborated with Mark's team to define the behavioral competency model for the new hospital and then build a hiring system to target those behaviors. And Mark and his team were responsible for all management aspects of opening the new facility. Obviously, this is a unique and exciting challenge that most people don't get, but this included design of the facility, workflow, human resources, medical staff development, community relations, financial planning, you name it. And 3 years after opening the doors, UPMC East has the top patient satisfaction scores in the system, which is an exciting story. Mark also leads UPMC's international efforts, and we're actually working with him next month on a physician leadership training program for physicians from China, which we're excited about. Mark's approach at UPMC East is unique in that the entire culture was built around the idea that employee engagement is the starting point. And I'll hand it off to Mark now.
Thank you, Brian. It's an honor to be part of the webinar. So I'm just going to take the next 5 minutes and kind of walk you through a little bit of our story at East, and then from a global perspective, what UPMC is doing in some of these areas. So we had the opportunity to build a hospital, as Brian said. We really focused from the very beginning on the culture and what that means in terms of the values. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. The talent strategies for us on hiring the right employees, and it's just how that drives the patient experience in terms of what Donna said. So I just want to share this quote with you because we've used this so much in building this new hospital and hiring our staff. Our hospital, by the way, is a 160-bed community, fully comprehensive care provided, inpatient and outpatient. But you can design and create and build the most wonderful place in the world, but it takes people to make a dream a reality. We use this a lot because it was messaging really that it's great to have a new hospital, new technology, new ORs, but it's not about the bricks and mortar. It is really about the people, and this is what really drove our culture from the beginning. So I won't go through these in detail, but these were our values as an organization. We had identified them very consistent with all hospitals within UPMC. All organizations have your values, so you have the slide. You can just take a quick peek at them. Next slide, Brian. I did want to share this with you because this, as you see our values noted at the bottom, this is just a little pictorial about the foundation and the strength of a root of a tree and how important that is to really have those values, and they never change. And as an organization moving to build a new hospital, we use those values in every decision we made, not only in terms of hiring, but the service lines, the physicians that we were recruiting, and all tough decisions in terms of just building a new hospital. But what we found over 4 years, we've been up in 4 years now, is that if we have satisfied employees, that will lead to very loyal patients, and that will lead to financial viability, a sustained competitive advantage in terms of what Donna said. And you get that win, but you have to start with your values, and you have to start with building employee engagement. So our talent system, well, what we did is we defined a behavioral competency model, aligned that with our values and visions. We worked with Select International on that. Our senior team behavioral assessments, it was a 90-minute behavioral assessment online. Every supervisor and manager had to complete the assessment. And actually, it was very successful for us to screen and select top talent in terms of what we were looking for, matching our cultural values. We have a lot of applicants for jobs, and as it relates to this, we also use this as a selection system for frontline staff too. That was a 15-minute behavioral assessment, and our team from the very beginning really looked across the UPMC system and tried to, we call it borrowing brilliance within the system. We did not hire one consultant in terms of building the new hospital. We wanted to leverage all the good things that we have done as a system and try to make sure that we learn from them and apply those to building a new hospital. And one of the things that we came up with very early on was a theme that we're hiring for talent and behavioral traits over experience. And so we had a lot of applicants that had a lot of experience, and even internal applicants that were applying for jobs for a new hospital within the system. But we made the decision that we were going for talent and behavioral traits. And this behavioral assessment tool really helped us identify those staff members that had the values that we outlined that I shared with you, and that they were aligned with what we were looking for in terms of compassion and just upbeat, very enthusiastic individuals that wanted to work in an environment that we were looking to put them in. And we use that, hiring managers, we really use these tools to help coach and educate after completing the assessments. That was then used as a tool to invest in them. So the next slide will just briefly go over our approach in investing in staff members, and we've always said, this is good for your profession, but it's good personally too. We made every staff member and invested in them by going through all these types of training programs, anything as simple as telephone etiquette to disabilities awareness, conflict resolution, time stress management. So our staff really appreciate that investment in them. So what's patient satisfaction? I think everybody understands this, but for a new hospital, we just had some time to reflect, and we said for patients coming to a hospital, it's really not making patients happy. They're not going to Disney World. It's really about listening, responding to them, understanding that the whole industry that we're in from a hospitality perspective is really about understanding what our patients and customers really are going through. They have a high level of anxiety. They're very stressful. They don't know what's going on with them. So the approach in terms of our staff training was really from a compassionate standpoint and just really establishing that trust from the very beginning. So I did want to share this. This is a very interesting chart. And what this shows really supports what Donna was speaking to, as well as myself, and that you'll hear from Brad. But these are HCAP scores from hospitals, from 52 different hospitals all combined. And what you see in the purple are the HCAP scores for the top hospitals that have the top 20% of employee engagement. And what you see in the gray score are the HCAP scores that have the bottom 20% of employee engagement. So very clearly, statistically significant, really supports that if you have employees that are engaged, you're going to have a better patient experience, which is the goal of all of us. So it just really supports the effort, and what we'll break out into the panel discussion here about how to get leadership to understand employee engagement is so synergistic with patient experience. Switching gears a little bit, this is the UPMC hierarchy for our organization, which is very large in terms of focusing on the experience. So what you see circled there is the Employee Experience Committee. I co-chair that with Mary Beth Jenkins, who's our Chief Operating Officer of our health plan. And the two of us are really representing for our system of 60,000 employees. What are we doing for employee engagement? We have three other committees, one for community experience, one for member experience for our health plan, which has 3 million subscribers. And then also we have a very focused team on the patient experience and everything that we're doing in regards to patient satisfaction. So we actually, as an organization, are moving towards using the behavioral assessments for every hire as an organization. So if we have a 10% turnover rate, we're hiring over 6,000 people per year. We are now using the behavioral assessment that we used at East because, as Brian had indicated, we have the highest inpatient satisfaction scores 4 years in a row within our system, and a lot of that's based on the values and the culture that we've developed. I won't go through this in detail, but this is just an example of how the employee engagement hierarchy works. So you can see at the top the overall steering committee. Then every hospital and business plan actually has an employee engagement committee, and they have a chair of that who's either executive or teamed up with a frontline staff member. And we realize as an organization that's fairly large that culture is local, so we want the bottom-up ideas in terms of what everybody's doing. A lot of organizations have put a number of these different categories that you see at the bottom of this chart and sort of consolidated them. And so these are all the things that we're working on for employee experience, and have really began to track that. And this is a busy slide, but we did put it in. As an organization, we survey our employees every 2 years. And we had this past survey, we had 62% response rate. And what our employees have told us as an organization is that they really want us to focus on 4 areas. They want enhanced trust, better listening, more caring as an employer, and then growth and improvement. So those 4 themes across the top were really the driving themes that our employees were telling us that they would like to see improvement in terms of a workforce. So for each one of those areas, I would just focus on listening as an example. We have 2 drivers that we developed. One is rounding, and the other is visibility and networking. As the employee engagement committee for UPMC, what we've done is we've gotten all these ideas across all of our hospitals, and we started putting these programs together. And that's what you see in all the different colors for all the different programs in terms of what we're doing as an organization to improve the employee experience, and then recognizing that these 8 categories underneath each one of those 4 themes are the drivers for us for success in terms of improving the employee experience. So you can just kind of get a glance at a couple of those, but I did want to just include that in the PowerPoint. I think that concludes my part of the presentation.
Thanks, Mark. What I think is interesting, what I've heard so far, is that your experiences, Donna's experience, and the data show that there is a direct link between employee engagement and talent strategies and the patient experience and organizational results. And you both had the unique opportunity of building something from scratch. It's always easier, in some respects, it's easier to build that culture from scratch for a new facility. But I think on Donna's sustainability point, Mark, you guys are adding structure to this so that you can take those same approaches throughout the system and spread that success and and sustain it. And I think it's interesting because it's at a time where I've dealt with some clients recently who've grown somewhat frustrated around the idea of employee engagement because they've struggled to be successful, to the point where I've talked to a few recently who stopped getting the data, who stopped surveying employees because they weren't doing anything with it. And I think that's probably a good transition to Brad, because Brad is the Director of Performance Improvement and Research for HealthStream. HealthStream provides solutions for healthcare training and learning management, talent management, performance assessment, credentialing, and simulation-based training. Brad and his team perform research that provides valuable insight to help healthcare providers to meet HCAHPS requirements, engage their workforce, and enhance physician alignment. Select International is actually proud to be a HealthStream partner, and Brad's going to share some of his comments on recent research and some other related topics. Go ahead, Brad.
Thank you, Brian. It's a pleasure to be with you all, and it's an honor really to represent my team at HealthStream. We're a team that's on a journey with our customers to advance healthcare through measurement and through learning solutions. And really the goal of those things is to result in improved patient care, increased productivity, assimilation of new practices, enhanced compliance, you name it. Really what we're looking for is better outcomes, achieving better outcomes with our customers. And so as Brian just suggested, really what I want to talk to you about in my next few minutes is the linkage between engagement and higher outcomes. So we at HealthStream, we believe that the experiences of your patients, your providers, your employees, even your consumers must guide where you focus improvement training, and development efforts. For over 25 years, we at HealthStream, we've been the trusted source for education and development resources for 70% of hospitals in this country. We do that by sharing content, simulation, competency, coaching tools with over 4.4 million providers, nurses, and employees each year. Now, through our relationships with our customers, we've actually seen a disconnect between those that are giving care and those that are receiving it. Because in the last year, just last year alone, we measured the experiences of over 2 million patients through our patient experience research solution, including 20% of hospitals participating in HCAHPS, and nearly 300,000 employees and providers through our employee and physician engagement research. So when we look at the education and training resources we have available, and then we compare and contrast that with the data and what those results are telling us our customers want in that relationship, the question is, and this is the question we try to help our customers answer, why do we sometimes struggle to deliver the exceptional experience that Mark just described? So really, as we look ahead, on the next slide, really the key factor here is confidence. And there's two sides to the coin with regard to confidence. One question I want you to ask yourselves is, are your patients and consumers confident that they are safe and receiving the best possible care? The other question I want you to ask yourself is, are your providers, are your employees throughout the organization, are they confident that they have the support of leaders and coworkers as well as the tools and resources they need to provide the best care possible? Now, when we evaluate the idea of confidence and some of the drivers behind how patients and providers struggle with regard to their confidence in their care that they're either receiving or providing, what's interesting is that confidence is clearly driven by the exact same behaviors. On the patient side of the equation, patients tell us time and time again through our research that their confidence is driven by clear communication with their caregivers. When we keep patients informed, when we treat them with courtesy and respect, they are much more likely to have a better experience and to have a positive outcome. When you contrast that to employees and providers, with our engagement research, their confidence in their employer is clearly driven by having clear communication with managers. So when you hear Mark discuss the importance of rounding and visibility and transparency, those processes are so important to bolster the confidence of our workforce to develop a better outcome. Now, when we look deeper into the patient experience, there's actually a similar tone across the landscape that we see. So what I have shown here on the screen is 4 of the CAHPS surveys that are in the market. Obviously, CG CAHPS, ED, HCAHPS, and then home health. So we have different CAHPS survey products in place across the continuum of care. And what you'll see sort of horizontally across each of these 4 rows are what we call the top or key drivers of the patient experience within each of these 4 settings. Now, as you look a little bit deeper into each one of these care settings and you look at the key drivers, in other words, through our analysis and our research and development, these are the things that patients are telling us are the most important drivers of the experience. These are the things they care most about, and these are the behaviors that are most predictive of a positive or a negative outcome. And clearly, when you look at the ones with the checks by them, what we see is that communication is the most critical theme to success, regardless of what door you enter in healthcare. So, doctor listening carefully to you, nurses listening carefully to patients, even in home health, keeping patients informed and up to date about at-home care and treatment. Communication rules the day with regard to what is the key theme, the key behavior that we need to make sure our employees and our providers are comfortable and confident with to provide our patients with the best possible outcome. And so really what we're looking to do here is we're looking to change the conversation, as Brian alluded to, with regard to how research and data is used to enhance our talent management strategies and to ultimately achieve better outcomes in healthcare. So what we're looking to do, and the journey I mentioned at HealthStream, is we are working with our customers to allow the voices of the healthcare community, not just patients, but providers, employees, and consumers. We want the input and the feedback that we collect through that research to connect to and drive workforce development. We feel like when we do this, when we shift this paradigm that we currently have and allow the feedback that we capture through our research to align and drive the development of our workforce and their knowledge, skills, and abilities, we're going to satisfy our journey of improving patient care across this country. Brian?
Oh, thank you, Brad. That was awesome. One of the things that we really love about our partnership with HealthStream is this sort of information. I don't think that we normally have a discussion about employee engagement as it relates to patient satisfaction and bring in this concept of confidence, where HealthStream, Brad's team in particular, have some expertise. And I think it drives home the point that we've been making, that all of the challenges that the organizations are facing, that your organizations are facing, certainly there are process solutions, certainly there are technology solutions, but the interesting realization, and I think the success stories you've heard about, is that behaviors are a huge component of this, and we can impact that through really deliberate talent strategies, be they selection, training and development, or engagement. So I think that's the right direction. I think everybody gets that now. A lot of folks are submitting questions. I'd encourage you to do that. I will start incorporating those. But what I wanted to do was start with some pretty straightforward questions. I'm going to start with Donna. Donna, when we talk about employee engagement, we didn't get into the actual factors that impact it. Can you speak for a few minutes on the factors that you believe are most impactful on employee engagement?
Thank you, Brian. I think there are a lot of factors that impact it, but I see this as kind of four perspectives. One, if you are hiring the right individual that has a positive, resilient attitude and can see change as opportunity, you will begin to start that process. Number two, they need a team around them, willing and able to work together to take joint accountability, have each other's backs, and achieve success together. So you first have the individual, then the team. Then you need the CEO and the senior leaders who take responsibility for engagement and never, ever lose sight of, no matter how busy they are constantly communicating, they are constantly thinking and acting upon employee engagement. And finally, the organization. You cannot have all of these people internally, and I think Mark said it very well, without a culture where there's a well-defined vision, values, strategies, expectations, and metrics that every staff knows. They know why they need to change. They know why we need to measure it. And they can all come together in a place where people are able to thrive. So it's really those four things: the person, the team, the leadership, and the organization.
Perfect. Thank you, Donna. And it's interesting, I'm getting several similar questions that tied into this. In both of your experiences, Donna and Mark, you had the opportunity recently, at least, to open a new hospital. So the selection process was able to target a certain behavioral profile. But you've both certainly worked in existing organizations. And the questions are around, and I'll start with you, Mark, what do you do with toxic employees or those who simply aren't engaged? How do you handle a workforce? And I think a lot of the attendees are dealing with this. You have a culture and an organization of current employees, and there's a struggle. They're either completely toxic or at least not engaged. What do you do with that, Mark?
Well, first, in terms of the hiring process, that's what you want to avoid, and that's why it's really important to have a selection process and to really do our best to make sure that we're hiring individuals that have the predictive behavioral trait to be toxic, that they be screened out. Now, as you know, certainly everybody hires people that makes mistakes, and sometimes just within an organization, behavioral traits can change a little bit too. I think the important thing here for us is that we really focused on also discussing the anti-values of the organization. So as the values of the organization, everybody has them, but we were much more descriptive. And so when we opened up the hospital and we were hiring people and the staff were coming on board, we very much focused on anti-values. And let me give you a couple different examples. An anti-value would be somebody that would provide a lot of negative talk in the hallway. An anti-value would be somebody who would spread rumors and hearsay and all those types of things. We listed out like 20 anti-values so that people understood that when they do these types of things, they're going to be addressed. So, when you have someone that's toxic or it's a bad apple in the middle of the bag, we had the approach to make changes quickly and not let things go on. And so we built our values into the job description of all of our employees. And so we actually would terminate employees based on an anti-value. And so that really was helpful because some of these areas can be very gray. And but when you build it into the values into the job description, and then you have the ability from an HR perspective to move a lot quicker to move someone to a final written warning or a zero tolerance termination. Now we had some of that, but fortunately not a lot because we were very descriptive from the start.
I think that's important, Mark. A lot of the work that we do when we talk about defining behavioral competency models goes below just those customer service standards and gets into very specific positive and negative behaviors that we're looking for. And I think you owe it to the staff to communicate very specifically what it is that you're looking for, but then you have to make the very difficult decision sometimes that someone's just not willing or able to do that. Donna, you've dealt with, I know, leadership teams occasionally or folks on leadership teams who don't get some of these concepts, and I'm getting a lot of questions about that. How do you get a leadership team on board to really value these approaches?
Well, if you've already gone past the point of hiring them and they are there, I believe you need to I still believe in giving people a chance to change, and that is with some assistance, with some development, still continuing to set the expectations. One of the things that we always did was to have the behavioral part of our performance evaluations so that people could see, okay, I'm doing fine on these 9 out of 10 things, but I still have some behavioral issues here that I need to deal with. But at some point, you really need to help someone move on. And eventually, I think if you really continue, as Mark will, hiring people in the right way, it will not be comfortable for toxic individuals to continue to work there because they will have nothing to fuel that fire.
Perfect. I'm getting a number of questions, and I'm going to direct this one to Brad about physicians, so I'm going to jump forward a bit. Brad, what does your research show, your work with clients about engaging physicians in these sorts of initiatives?
Yeah, it's a great question. So physician engagement is definitely a tricky topic. The first thing that comes to mind when we discuss physician engagement and we sort of look at how our clients are working through that issue to try to increase their outcomes is there is at times amongst some organizations there's a term that's used called we need to increase their buy-in. We need to really improve physician buy-in, which in our experience actually is a dissatisfier and a frustrator to a lot of physicians because it implies that that group is the problem and that they're misaligned with administration or leadership. So I think it requires a fresh approach amongst leaders to really sort of redefine what buy-in means and making sure that we're not looking to get them on board per se, but rather to align and make sure that our interests amongst leadership and amongst administration and amongst the physician population, that those interests are similar and common. Beyond that, what's interesting in looking at our physician research is that it really mirrors employee research on some level, because some of the key drivers that we see with regard to predicting and achieving high levels of physician engagement is trust in leadership and the opportunity to give and receive constructive feedback about their own performance as well as their peers. Physicians are really telling us more and more that trust in leadership and constructive feedback in sort of a two-way fashion, those are really important factors to producing a better experience for them to practice medicine. Lastly, the last thing I'll say with regard to sort of the key lever to pull when it comes to engaging physicians is we have to make sure that they have input into both clinical and administrative decisions. They want to have a voice, and providers want to make sure that their voice is heard and it's meaningfully used in a way to improve patient care. That's really what it's about. That's where their passion is. And so by doing these things, by making sure that we have trust in leadership, we have feedback that's working in both directions, and we make sure that physicians' voice is heard in terms of improving the organization, improving the care of those we serve, those are the things to look for to produce that good experience.
Mark, I know as you were building the medical staff out at UPMC East, a lot of these things were top of mind, and I know you had discussions with physicians about the culture you were trying to build and the expectations you had. Was there anything specific you did to make sure those people were on board?
Well, I agree with everything Brad said. That was excellent, and maybe just to echo a couple of different points. And we looked for every physician leader to be a champion for employee engagement. So in terms of at building a medical staff, and we all have them. You have a vice president of medical affairs or a chief medical officer, and you have a president of medical staff too. Those two leaders are really important to really get in front of and spend time educating and training and building a relationship so that they are really engaged with the C-suite. That employee engagement, employee satisfaction is so important. And again, the synergy with that outcome with patient experience and showing them the data, some of the chart I showed, for example, with the HCAHPS scores, it's really telling, and physicians want to see that. And as they understand that the result is our ability will be able to recruit top talent and also have very high retention factors. So, we need to do all physicians, that work at our hospitals are some employed in some private practice, and it's most of our places have a hybrid medical staff, so engaging our medical staff and the chiefs and the chairs and then the full medical staff in this is a challenge, but we make it a very high priority because the interaction between our clinical staff and our support teams with the medical staff really is what builds that culture. And we just, I guess I would end by saying, education, having champions, and then cascading that throughout the medical staff.
And Mark, you mentioned go ahead, Donna.
I just had a couple of final comments about that to add to that. I think sometimes with healthcare staff and C-suite members, we forget that physicians enjoy recognition just as much as anybody else. And it was hard to get people to understand that, but we have built some recognition programs that really made physicians feel extremely honored. They were their peers selecting them, and it was done in front of a very public audience with their peers. So not forgetting that recognition is important and that we need to also recognize the good work that they are doing. Plus, I also have been engaged in a lot of recruitment, and as I'm sure Mark has, of clinicians and clinician leaders. You've got to continue to nurture that relationship. You can't hire them, recruit them, send them off to do their clinical work, and then never spend time with them. So I think being visible with them, listening to their issues, and then recognizing them when they've done good work.
That's a great point, Donna. The mistake we see a lot of times is all the money, energy, and resources go into recruiting them. And then once they're there, we plug them in and hope for the best. We don't recognize their efforts. We don't put a developmental plan in place. And they're invaluable resources. So having no particular structure, strategy, or plan in place to make them successful is really a disservice, and it's a significant problem. Mark, you mentioned the role of the VPMA and the CMO. One of the things we've seen is an increase in demands or requests from us to get involved in treating these people as a true executive selection process where we're defining the new roles of physician leaders and evaluating candidates much differently than we did just a few years ago, so that person in the leadership role is setting the tone. I've had a couple questions now about the role of HR, so I'm going to jump ahead to that. And the question that was posed originally was this. HR is frequently risk-averse and protective, and it's sometimes safe to maintain essentially a transactional role. How have you, I'll start with Donna and then Mark, how have you seen the role of human resources change, and are senior leaders thinking about HR differently? We'll start with Donna.
Thanks, Brian. I think the first thing is that human resources needs to be at the table. They need to be at the C-suite table. They need to be at the board table. They need to be there for every critical discussion about strategy, planning, what the needs are for that culture in the future. Because if they're not, they cannot provide anything beyond just being policy police. So I think, first of all, they need to be a part of that. We need to consider HR metrics to be as important, if not more important, than the financial metrics. I've been to board meetings, I've sat in on C-suite discussions where everything's about the money and nothing about the people. And yet you can't do anything without people. So I think the importance is going to be that they are going to be there, they're going to help set strategy, and they're going to be working side by side with the leadership in making sure that the right people and the right culture are there going forward.
Mark, I know we've had discussions with UPMC about this process. How do you look at it?
Yeah, I would agree with that. The HR field within our organization, UPMC, has really transformed over the last 5 years. Yeah, certainly less transactional and much more relational, and really driving training and development towards cultural-based outcomes. And being members of the management team involved in all of our decisions, helping us define very specific programs for recruiting top talent, and then what do you do when you get that top talent? The most important thing, as Brian indicated, is the onboarding process, the recognition, the relationship, the trust, the career development, and upward mobility within an organization, so important for retention. Human resources plays a significant role for us in really identifying and building these types of programs, including sort of the active listening skills and communications. Those things are so important. They really have helped our organization, both medical staff and management team, understand that just how important that employee engagement is. So we are definitely partners.
Good. I'm going to move on quickly here. I'm going to ask Brad a question because it touches on something you just said, Mark, about communication and listening skills. Brad, I know you're spending a lot of time talking about nurses, their ability to jump in and be successful, have career satisfaction. What's changed? What are the skill sets beyond the confidence piece that you guys are focusing on to make nurses successful? Because obviously nursing success is critical in patient satisfaction.
Exactly. That's right. Well, if you look at the barriers that we discussed earlier, both in your opening remarks as well as Donna's, when you look at the barriers that we have in healthcare these days, really three things come to mind as far as knowledge, skills, and abilities with regard to nursing and that profession and how it needs to be probably addressed and maybe even improved. One is adaptability, simply because of the amount of priorities now and the degree of difficulty there. We need to make sure that we are assessing and sort of developing our skill sets amongst the nursing profession to make sure that we have adaptable nurses and we make sure we have a population that can sort of react to as well as prepare for change adequately, both in an individual way as well as sort of a group way. Secondly, clearly technology has changed healthcare, and technology and specifically has changed the nursing profession. And so making sure that knowledge, skills, and abilities amongst our nursing workforce reflects those changes is important as well. So how do we assess for those skills and hire and select the right people? But then, as we said earlier, how do we develop those skills over time? Because the technology that we're implementing through our integrated delivery systems is clearly changing daily. The last thing I'll say is pace. How do we react to sort of an increased pace amongst the workload that nurses have? Really, I think what it all boils down to, besides those three things, is those things have changed, and those skills need to be addressed. But beyond all else, I think if you ask the majority of nurses in this country right now what drives them and what motivates them, is the ability to do purposeful work. And so regardless of the amount of change happening in this industry, which is clearly happening over and over again and faster, I think that we need to find ways to constantly remind nurses of the connection to their passion and why they get up every day to do this work. And when we do that, I think we'll avoid the issues of burnout we discussed earlier, and even issues of desensitization, really, because those things can have a sort of a drastically negative effect on outcomes. So I think that's what has changed in the nursing profession, but I think that there are some things that will never change, and making sure that we connect them to the purpose of their work is probably one of those things that will never change.
I like the idea of connecting them to their passion. We've done a few webinars recently on the role of staff behaviors and patient safety, particularly a great story from our partner at McLeod Health in Florence, South Carolina, where an initial project to implement an OR checklist was not particularly successful, not because the process was wrong, but because they didn't engage the folks sufficiently. When they started the project again and started with the idea of connecting people to their passion and their purpose, and then they understood the role of this in taking care of patients, they had significantly more success. So it's interesting how all of these pieces are really connected, and the cultural piece is important. Now, starting with Mark and then Donna, a lot of what you're talking about requires a different leadership style and some different leadership skills than we looked for a few years ago. So Mark, as you were building the leadership team at UPMC East, what specific behavioral traits and skills were you looking for that might be different than you looked for a few years ago?
Well, I think we were looking for a shifting paradigm. I think historically we've always looked for individuals that had the competency and the technical skills, those hard skills. We were looking for a shifting paradigm where we were moving from competency to compassion and from hard skills to soft skills. And so we were looking for the emotional IQ. To be honest, I mean, competency wasn't enough. And so we defined from the very beginning that competency is nice and required, but it really isn't enough. If we have the ability to recruit the best, we want to create an environment that Brad said just perfectly. We'll create an environment where staff feel that their work is meaningful and they're part of an organization that's moving the needle on patient experience, and we're doing great things. And that's what we found, what people want to be a part of. And so, again, we've moved from the skill set of transactional to relational as well. We're transactional would be the historical, I work, I get paid, I go home, towards relationship where I really look forward to going to work because I like working with my peers. I'm respected by my supervisor. I have a relationship that's professional, and I feel good about my contributions. So that's really what we strove for.
And Donna, with that in mind, what can we do to encourage leadership development? Because that's something we've talked about a lot, that most organizations struggle with this. There's a bit of a gap there. If we do a good job, like Mark, defining what it is we're looking for and picking people that have those attributes, but what can we do better once they're in the organization to give them the leadership skills to be successful?
I'd say before you even get them in the door, the onboarding in the recruitment process, I think, tells people this is our expectation before you come here. We're going to give you the tools to help you get there, but before you come in, you need to know that. And I know there are several organizations these days that are considering look at this video, tell us what you think about it. If this is not a place that you're comfortable with, don't even apply for the position, interestingly enough. Or they do team interviewing to be able to make sure everybody knows what a team member does. We have to support the leadership development. Many a budget has gone by in years past that say we just don't have the money to do leadership development. The investment must be there from the organization, and it can't be arguing over do you pay somebody to do it, not do it. Everybody should do it, want to do it, and the money and the resources should be there to help them do it. If every individual has a plan and for their own leadership development, the investment in human resources is made, and we give them experiences in and outside of their department, people will want to do it. I think they're already engaged. They want to build their dreams. They want to do the things that they always wanted to do when they went to school and before they started working.
One of the things that came up, and I think it's related to that because as people start to see these connections, is getting managers, and several people commented on this, getting hiring managers to appreciate their role in talent. that it's not HR's job strictly to get you the right people and develop them, that the hiring manager's role is to find what you need, to collaborate with HR in finding those people, using the tools that exist, interviewing, creating a feedback loop, so that the hiring manager appreciates their role in talent. Obviously, I'm not going to get to all of the questions that we have, and we're going to try and wrap on the hour, because what I found in the past is people start to drop off right after the hour anyway, even though we're booked until a quarter after the hour. A couple very simple questions that came up. One was, I think it was to Mark, about did you use an outside consultant or third-party behavioral assessment. That's actually the work that we do at Select International. We don't encourage people to build their own behavioral assessments unless you have that expertise in-house. I think it creates more problems than benefit. And we have a suite of those solutions, and our approach to that is looking for tools that are built specifically for selection and tools that are built specifically for healthcare, be it physicians, nurses, or frontline staff. The other question was about validation, and our approach is, whenever possible, to do a local validation study. It's not required necessarily. You can establish validation a number of ways. Mark's organization, for instance, very clear correlation between the selection system that they put in place and the results. For the system at large, as we roll that out, we will do a more detailed validation study, and we do those all the time, so we encourage people to do it. The other really practical question for both Mark and Donna was, when you talk about the customer service standards, how do you make them simple enough that people can understand them and live them, and who should be involved in that process? And Mark, you've been through it recently, so we'll start with you.
Well, yeah, customer service standards, again, I think the more you can clarify up front what those are, it's educational. So, for existing organizations, everybody's working on the overall improvement of the patient experience. And we start with the HCAP scores and Press-Ganey. And so for those that work in hospitals, they're very familiar with those. And so from the educational perspective of the very specific 10 questions on HCAPs, that's what we use in terms of establishing the standard, because that's how we're measured and compared to our competitors in many ways. So we have very clear communication plans and share that data, where we're making progress in each one of those areas on the HCAPs, and also the Press-Ganey.
And Donna, you've been through this process enough too, and we've got some attendees who are right in the middle of it. And I've been part of these discussions, and they could drag on for 12 months trying to come up with something that's going to be on the back of everybody's name badge and on a plaque, but they don't necessarily live it. What's the best way, in your experience, to come up with something that resonates with people and that they can live?
Well, like Mark, I think you start with the data from patients themselves, whether that's HCAPs or you bring a patient and family advisor out to the front. There's nothing more meaningful than having a patient tell their story to that team of staff and that individual to get them to understand what's really important to the patient. I do not believe staff want to do something that's in opposition to that, so I think they need to be a part of that discussion of the standards, utilizing what's there, utilizing good patient and family advisors to help give them some input.
And I think it's important to know that a lot of people have been through this. So organizations who are trying this on their own without trying to find out what Mark or Donna or some third-party vendor has done, it's going to be longer and more painful than it needs to be. The same is true for us when we develop behavioral competency models. We were able to help Mark and help Donna's new hospital come up with that relatively quickly because it's what we do. With the idea that we're going to try and end right on the hour here, I'll give you guys just a second to think about this, and we'll start with Brad. Out of all of this, if people could leave today with a couple things you'd love to see them do that you think would have an impact, what would they be? And we'll start with Brad.
So I think it's two things. One, I hope that we've illustrated the criticality and the importance of collecting research and sort of measuring the experience of your employees, your physicians, and clearly your patients. Obviously, we touched on that throughout the entire presentation. I think the importance, though, of that is to connect that research, to connect that data to help develop the skills of your workforce. Those are two very separately managed processes in many organizations. Patient experience measurement, for instance, is often handled from a nursing standpoint perhaps, or maybe patient experience officer, whereas workforce development is traditionally more of an HR org development type of initiative. We need to make sure those two initiatives are aligned, because the feedback we collect from patients, employees, and providers can and should drive our workforce development initiatives. So that's one, connecting those two things. The second, many of your questions and many of our conversations today have touched on the subject of accountability. You can't have accountability without it being clearly defined by all parties in the organization. And so it's easy to say, let's create and sustain a culture of accountability, but what that means is clearly defining in objective a way as possible what accountability means to us as individuals, what it means to us organizationally. By doing those two things, I think you'll set yourself up for better success.
Perfect. Mark, what did you learn with the new hospital that people can use?
Well, one, I guess I would recommend the value-based assessments and really utilizing and leveraging that to create the culture that you want. So for us, that's where we had success, and that's what we're deploying throughout UPMC. The second is investment in our managers and supervisors. The relationship between our management team and our frontline staff is directly correlated with the patient experience. So creating those tools and resources and the training and development and investing in our managers for their success, because they get pulled in so many different directions, resulted in a positive outcome. I'll just end by making a quick note of a recent tool that we've created as an example on that. We've created a healthy culture index score for our managers. It's a report card that actually shows 4 different things. It shows turnover, unscheduled time off, employee engagement score, and incident rates. And so they're benchmarked not in a punitive measure at all. But if they're below standard in any of those areas, you click on this tool and it brings up all these resources to help them be successful. So if turnover's high, they click on it and actually lists out all these different things that they can do to help turn around turnover, improve those scores. So as we say to our managers, we're investing in you. These are tools and resources for you to be successful. Thanks, Brian.
What I really like about that, Mark, is we say all the time that you have to make culture concrete, that you have to identify specifically what you're looking for at an organization level, and then the behaviors of the workforce that will contribute to that culture. I think too often organizations leave culture as a very ambiguous term, and one of the things that you've done, and I know you did at Children's Hospital as well with the folks over there, was a 5-year strategic plan to build the culture that you have in mind and take very deliberate steps to go there. Donna, I'll let you finish. Okay. What are the few critical points that you think people need to take away?
I think hire like your future is dependent on it. Use someone like Select and have them help you through this. Be consistent, be visible, don't accept bad behavior. Have a healthy environment for your staff, both physically, mentally, and in all ways. Tell stories. I'm a firm believer that telling the story will be able to demonstrate what you really want the culture to look like. You want to tell the story of the patient. And then I guess my last thing is act with the sense of urgency. Just make it happen as soon as possible.
I love paint the picture, tell the story, and I think the mistake people make is they don't do it enough. They do it at the beginning of some initiative. It needs to be done every day. I think that's what people connect to as well. The rest of the questions that were submitted, thank you, everybody. I'll try and get answers to those, and we'll send them out to you. I know Becker's will make the slide deck available to everybody. In fact, I think you'll be able to access the actual webinar itself. It will be archived both with them and with us. I wanted to thank the panel today. Great group, really interesting discussion. I had a feeling that it would be. I get the honor of working with these 3 folks, and they're brilliant, and their organizations are great, so I'm glad they took the time to do it. And thanks to Becker's as well for sponsoring these. You always do a wonderful job. And again, if anybody has any questions, needs more information, feel free to reach me directly or just look around our website and find out more about the work that we do. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.